You can buy a ticket to fly in a Chinese aircraft with no pilot, no steering wheel, and nobody at the controls for about $41. You climb into a two-seat drone in Hefei or Guangzhou, the doors close, and it takes off while a ground operator miles away flies it over 5G. But that pod is the smallest machine on this list. China has 3 more flying today, up to a nearly 6-ton, 10-passenger aircraft that just completed a full transition flight. We are ranking all 4, smallest to biggest, and showing the mechanism behind every headline claim. Meanwhile, Joby Aviation flew its first FAA-conforming test aircraft in the United States this past March, and industry analysts don't expect full FAA type certification before mid-2027 at the earliest. Archer Aviation is chasing the same finish line from a different runway, with its own commercial launch still pending regulatory sign-off. The whole American and European eVTOL sector has burned through more than $13 billion in investment since 2019, and as of right now, commercial passenger revenue from any of it still sits at effectively zero. China skipped straight past that waiting room entirely. Certificates and all. 4 different companies, 4 different aircraft, 4 different stages of an industry the rest of the world is still drafting paperwork for, while these 4 are already logging real flight hours over Chinese cities. Number 1. The EHang EH216S. And it's already the strangest item on this list, because none of it is a concept render. It's a real flying ticketed aircraft with a clear bubble canopy and gull-wing doors that lift up and out like a supercar's. The machine itself is a 2-seat 16-rotor pod with a maximum takeoff weight around 650 kilograms, a top speed of 81 miles an hour, a cruising speed closer to 62, and a service ceiling near 9,800 feet. Range runs about 22 miles on a single charge, with a flight time around 21 minutes and a 2-hour recharge in between flights. There's no joystick inside, no pedals, nothing to grab if something goes wrong. You sit down, the carbon fiber canopy closes, and the flight is flown by a ground operations center over a 5G radio link. That's the mechanism the headlines skip. Pilotless doesn't mean nobody's flying it. It means the pilot isn't in the seat next to you. Getting to a real ticket sale took EHang the better part of 6 years and 4 separate certificates from the Civil Aviation Administration of China, and that sequence itself is the actual proof of how serious this program is. A type certificate in October 2023 that formally approved the underlying design. A standard airworthiness certificate 2 months later that formally approved this specific aircraft. A production certificate in April 2024 that legally let them build more than 1 single unit off the line. And then, in March 2025, an air operator certificate, the piece almost nobody outside the industry talks about, because it's the one that turns a legal aircraft into a legal airline. No other passenger drone company on Earth has finished that whole sequence yet. Not Joby, not Archer, not Volocopter, all of whom are still waiting on their home regulators to clear a single seat for sale. By the time EHang and its operating partners opened ticketed public flights at Luogang Central Park in Guangzhou and at a dedicated vertiport in Hefei in early 2026, the aircraft had already logged more than 700 trial flights on top of tens of thousands of earlier test flights across its development, including deliberate runs through typhoons, heavy fog, and desert heat to stress test the autonomy stack before a single paying customer ever climbed in. That commercial rollout wasn't limited to 2 cities either. EHang and its partners now run some form of operation in Guangzhou, Hefei, Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Wenzhou, with more than 60,000 cumulative flights logged and, according to the company, 0 passenger injuries on record so far. A safety line regulators in other countries are reportedly watching closely as they write their own rules for aircraft like it. The early bird fare runs about 299 yuan, roughly $41, for a short hover and loop sightseeing route back to the same landing pad, cheaper than most helicopter tourism flights over a comparable city skyline. That's less than a movie ticket and popcorn in some American cities for a vertical takeoff aircraft with no pilot on board. If you want to actually own one outright, the sticker price runs about $330,000 in China and around $410,000 for export markets. And the Hefei city government alone has already committed to buying at least 100 of these aircraft or backing the local program, with financing worth up to $100 million in subsidies. EHang trades on the Nasdaq under the ticker EH, and in the first quarter of 2025, the company reported revenue of roughly $3.6 million, tiny next to the market value investors have assigned the stock. Most of that valuation is riding on a larger four-seat model called the VT-35, already flying in prototype form, and aimed squarely at the point-to-point routes this current aircraft can't fly yet. It's worth being honest about what you're actually paying for right now. It's a 15-minute joyride with a pilot on the ground standing in for one in the cockpit, not a point-to-point commute yet. But it's certified, it's insured, it's selling real tickets to real strangers, years ahead of anything Joby or Archer can currently offer a paying customer. And it's still the smallest machine on this entire list by a wide margin, both in size and in ambition, closer in feel to a theme park ride that happens to hold a real government-issued airworthiness certificate. The next one drives itself on 6 wheels long before anything on it ever leaves the ground. Number 2. XPeng's land aircraft carrier, built by the company's dedicated flying division, now rebranded from AeroHT to Aridge. The flying car label undersells what's actually happening under that skin. There are 2 separate vehicles traveling together here, a 6-wheeled electric van on the bottom and a 2-seat 6-rotor aircraft folded into the back, and only the top half ever leaves the ground. The van itself, nicknamed the mothership internally, runs on a range extender powertrain, good for roughly 621 miles of ground travel, with rear hinged doors and enough interior room for 4 people, plus the folded aircraft riding in its own bay. The flight module sits inside it completely unused until the moment you actually want to fly. Here's how the sequence actually works. You drive the van like a van, all the way out to wherever the road runs out or the traffic gets impossible. Then, the aircraft module rolls out of the rear bay on its own, unfolds its 6 rotors, and launches under autonomous navigation with a single control lever, while the mothership itself stays parked exactly where you left it. Nothing about the van ever gets airborne, not for a second. That single detail is the whole mechanism behind the name, and it's the reason the machine reads closer to a flying drone that happens to travel around inside a very large van than it does to an actual flying car in the way people picture one when they hear that phrase. The aircraft module has already completed its own first test flights in China and picked up type certification approval, a real step toward being cleared for public flights rather than closed test ranges. It also raises an obvious question. Outside of beating traffic on a holiday weekend or reaching a private island nobody else can land on, when does a normal driver actually need to park a 6-wheeled van and fly away in a 2-seat aircraft, leaving everyone else standing on the ground? XPeng's own answer so far is that more than 7,000 people already decided the question mattered less than being first in line. XPeng first showed the pairing publicly at CES in Las Vegas, then brought it home to a purpose-built factory. Aridge rolled its first production unit off a 120,000 square meter assembly line in Guangzhou on November 3, 2025, a facility the company calls the world's first mass production line built specifically for flying vehicles, with an initial capacity of 5,000 units a year, scaling toward 10,000 once fully ramped up. Roughly 1 finished vehicle every hour the line runs. By the time the company brought the land aircraft carrier to Munich for its European debut, rolling it out in colorways named Stellar Silver, Moonrock Gray, and Supernova White, it had already logged more than 7,000 pre-orders worldwide, more than any other flying car maker on the planet, by a wide margin, at a price under 2 million yuan, or roughly $280,000. Only one Western competitor, the Aleph Model A, is even taking pre-orders at a broadly comparable price, and it's still nowhere near a production line of its own. For comparison, XPeng's price also undercuts the roughly $330,000 an EH216S costs to own outright, on a machine built to also handle 621 miles of ordinary road, driving on top of whatever it does in the air. Deliveries are targeted at Chinese buyers first, with production ramping through the rest of this year, and type certification work with the CAAC still advancing on the flight module itself, the piece that actually needs to be legally airworthy before any of those 7,000 orders can take to the sky rather than just the highway. This is also the part of the list where the story stops being about eVTOL startups and starts being about the global auto industry directly. XPeng is a mainstream EV maker, already selling sedans and SUVs across Europe, that decided its own next product category was the sky. That's a very different kind of threat to Detroit and Stuttgart than anything coming out of a Silicon Valley eVTOL startup, because the manufacturing muscle, the battery supply chain, and the dealer network already exist and are already profitable on the ground. That's a real factory that already exists, building a real product with real deposits already on the books, which is further along than almost every eVTOL program in the West can currently claim for a vehicle this ambitious. But scale on the ground doesn't automatically mean scale in the air, and a two-seat aircraft folded into a van's trunk is still, at its core, a small aircraft. The next machine on this list is the one that got an entire country to let it fly demonstration routes across its own islands. Number 3, AutoFlight's Prosperity. And this is the item where the headline and the real story split the hardest of anything on this list. You'll see it reported in more than one place that this aircraft got Japan to open its airspace. Here's what actually happened on the ground, according to AutoFlight's own release and the regulator involved. In late November, AutoFlight's 2-ton eVTOL platform, the same underlying airframe that underpins Prosperity, flew its first demonstration flight in Okayama Prefecture, with full approval from the Japan Civil Aviation Bureau. That flight was a single clear demonstration for the shared 2-ton platform, years before Prosperity's own passenger service is set to switch on. It was part of a Japanese non-profit initiative called SCAI 28, the Setouchi Community AAM Infrastructure 2028 project, aimed at building actual commercial air mobility across the Setouchi region by 2028, the stretch of coastline and islands connecting 3 of Japan's 4 main islands, Honshu, Shikoku, and Kyushu, a region with aging infrastructure and limited transport between the mainland and its own remote islands. If breakdowns like this one are useful to you, hit subscribe. This channel covers a new piece of China's low-altitude economy push every single week, breaking down a different aircraft, factory, or certificate each time, and there's a lot more of it coming. AutoFlight's own paperwork tells a far more grounded story than the headline does. The passenger version of Prosperity is still working through Chinese certification, sitting in the compliance verification phase with the CAAC as of mid-2026, with commercial ticket sales targeted for 2027 to 2028, on routes similar to the one it already proved could work. The aircraft's own history goes back further than most people realize. AutoFlight first flew a Prosperity proof of concept in Jiangsu province back in 2022, then publicly debuted the design at the Paris Air Show in 2023. years before either of its more famous rivals got anywhere close to a certified seat. Once it does reach commercial service, the passenger version is designed to carry a pilot, plus 4 passengers up to roughly 155 miles at a cruising speed around 125 miles an hour. More than 6 times the range of the little EH216S pod that opened this list. Back in February 2024, a Prosperity airframe flew 50 kilometers across the Pearl River Delta from Shenzhen to Zhuhai entirely on its own. In what the company calls the world's first public cross-sea, intercity eVTOL flight, a crossing that takes about 3 hours by car and one that it covered in roughly 20 minutes by air, over open water bordering 3 international airports and one of the most densely populated regions on the planet. Later that same year, the aircraft crossed the Yangtze River near Nanjing on a separate demonstration, then set a 155.5-mile distance record on a single charge, taking the title away from an American competitor's previous best. And in May 2025, the same 2-ton platform flew 123 kilometers in Abu Dhabi and still landed with half its battery left. The cargo sibling of the same platform has already gone further than the passenger version has. Its carry-all variant holds a full-type certificate, production certificate, and airworthiness certificate from the CAAC, the first eVTOL above 1 ton anywhere to complete all 3. And in August 2025, it flew an actual offshore resupply mission for CNOOC, carrying cargo 150 kilometers from Shenzhen to an oil platform in 58 minutes, a trip that takes about 10 hours by boat. This June, Indonesia's aviation authority formally validated that same certificate, opening the door to commercial inter-island cargo runs there. And this July, the CAAC named AutoFlight in its proposed first batch of companies cleared for a faster passenger eVTOL certification pathway, alongside XPeng, Aridge, EHang, and a 4th eVTOL maker called Volant, a clear signal that the paperwork is finally catching up to the flying. So Open Japan's airspace really means a regulator cleared one proof-of-concept flight toward a commercial service that's still roughly 2 years out from actually selling seats. That's still further along than almost anyone else on Earth has gotten with an aircraft this size. But it's a meaningfully smaller claim than the headline it got turned into. Japan letting a Chinese eVTOL fly real demonstration routes over one of its own most transit-starved regions is the real headline here, quietly bigger and slower than the version that got clipped down for a thumbnail. And the machine actually closest to selling seats on a route like that is coming up next, the biggest aircraft on this entire list. Number 4. The AutoFlight Matrix, and this is where flying car stops being anywhere close to the right description. The Matrix has a 20-meter wingspan, runs 17.1 meters long and 3.3 meters tall, and weighs up to 5,700 kilograms at maximum takeoff, more than 8 times heavier than the EH216S that opened this list. So, how do you actually keep something that heavy in the air on batteries, when everything else on this list tops out under 3 tons? You don't. Not on batteries alone. The Matrix is built as a compound-wing triplane, with 20 separate motors handling vertical lift alone, and a further set mounted front and rear, pushing it forward once it transitions into wing-borne cruise. That's the mechanism behind the size problem every eVTOL company eventually runs into. Pure battery power gets heavier and shorter range the bigger an aircraft gets, which is why most eVTOLs on this list and everywhere else stay stuck in the 1.5 to 3 ton range, carrying 4 to 6 people. AutoFlight got around that ceiling by building something closer to a hybrid electric regional airplane that happens to take off and land like a helicopter. A small onboard generator burns fuel to keep the batteries topped up mid-flight, stretching the aircraft's range far past anything running on stored electricity alone. The same basic trick hybrid cars use, just scaled up and pointed at the sky. In February 2026, the Matrix completed a full transition flight at the Kunshan Civil UAV flight test and operation base outside Shanghai. Its triplane silhouette climbing straight up off the tarmac, leveling into wing-borne cruise, and dropping back down to a vertical landing. The first time any eVTOL in the 5-ton class has completed that full sequence in public anywhere in the world, flying that day alongside AutoFlight's own smaller carryall for comparison. In passenger configuration, the cabin runs 5.25 meters long and 1.8 meters wide, with a 1.85 meter aisle height, 13.9 cubic meters of usable volume, seating 10 people in a business class layout or 6 in a VIP configuration, with a hybrid electric range up to 1,500 kilometers and a cruise speed of 280 kilometers per hour. AutoFlight's own founder has compared the cabin directly to a $29 million Gulfstream business jet, minus the runway. The cargo version carries up to 1,500 kilograms of freight through a large forward opening door built around 2 standard AKE air cargo containers, the same units used to load commercial jets. In May 2026, AutoFlight flew the Matrix in formation with 2 of its own smaller 2-ton aircraft at once, deliberately testing whether a 5-ton flying machine and a fleet of much smaller ones can actually share the same low-altitude airspace without running into each other, which matters more than it sounds like it should once thousands of these things are airborne over the same cities. AutoFlight unveiled its own vertiport concept in Shanghai back in November 2025. The groundside infrastructure this aircraft and its smaller siblings will eventually need to actually load and unload passengers at real scale, not just a single test flight at a time. None of it is an accident of timing. The low-altitude economy was written directly into the Chinese Communist Party's own recommendations for the country's 15th five-year plan, the same policy document steering financing toward every single aircraft on this list. And China's domestic eVTOL market alone is projected to be worth close to $1.4 billion just this year. Neither AutoFlight's price tag nor its exact commercial launch date for the Matrix has been made public yet, which is the one real gap left in an otherwise finished-looking, already flying machine, and probably the detail worth watching closest over the next year, especially once a price actually gets attached to a cabin this close to a private jet's. Line all 4 up, and the pattern underneath the headlines gets a lot clearer than any single one of them suggests on its own. The EH216S proves a fully autonomous passenger aircraft can clear every regulatory hurdle and actually sell a ticket, even if the ticket only buys 15 minutes over a park. The land aircraft carrier proves a mainstream automaker can turn a flying vehicle into a real factory line with real pre-orders, using the same manufacturing muscle it already uses to build cars people drive to work. Prosperity proves the flight physics work well enough that a foreign aviation regulator will actually let the aircraft in, even while the commercial paperwork on both sides is still catching up to the hardware. And the Matrix proves the size ceiling everyone assumed eVTOL aircraft would hit for another decade was really just a power source problem, one a hybrid electric system just solved in public at a test base outside Shanghai in front of cameras. None of it is a single company's breakthrough. 4 separate teams are working 4 separate pieces of the same puzzle, on 4 different schedules, inside one regulatory system that keeps clearing them through faster than anywhere else right now. One is a sightseeing ride for 2 people that costs $41, flown by someone watching a screen from miles away. The other is a nearly 6-ton aircraft that just proved, in a real public flight test, that it can carry 10 people the distance of a short regional flight. On hardware, nobody outside China has gotten off the ground yet, let alone into commercial service. Every one of these 4 machines is flying somewhere in China right now, today, at 4 completely different stages of actually becoming a real business instead of a rendering on a slide deck. The country turning all four of these very different machines into one single working industry by 2027 is exactly what has the rest of the global auto industry panicking right now. And that full breakdown on exactly how that happens is already on screen waiting for you.